My parents chose my sister over me for a vacation, then one arrest, one secret, and one betrayal finally exposed everything they ignored. I'm the older sibling. I should probably start there, because in my family, that fact somehow stopped mattering a long time ago. My name's Daniel. I'm 32, live about 40 minutes away from my parents, and for most of my life, I've played the role of the dependable one. The kid who didn't get into trouble, the one who followed rules, showed up on time, paid his bills, and didn't cause scenes. If something needed fixing, I was the call. If there was an emergency, I was the backup plan. My younger sister, Emily, is 28. If I'm being honest, she's always been the opposite of me in ways my parents found exciting. She was loud where I was quiet, emotional where I was measured, reckless where I was cautious. And for reasons I still struggle to fully understand, those traits earned her far more grace than I ever got. Growing up, it was subtle at first. Emily would forget her homework, and my parents would laugh it off. I'd forget mine, and it was a lecture about responsibility. Emily would break curfew, and they'd say, "She's just figuring herself out." I stayed out late once and got grounded for 2 weeks. By the time we were adults, that pattern didn't disappear. It just changed form. I moved out at 22, paid my way through the tail end of college, and started working full-time almost immediately. Emily moved back home twice after failed jobs, short-lived relationships, and what my parents called rough patches. Every time, she was welcomed with open arms and zero expectations. I never resented her for needing help. I resented the fact that I was never allowed to need it. So when my mom called me one Thursday evening and casually mentioned that they were thinking about getting away for a bit, I didn't think much of it. My parents were in their late 50s, recently retired, and talked about travel all the time. "What kind of getaway?" I asked, mostly out of politeness. "Oh, just something small," she said. "Nothing fancy." I didn't hear anything else about it for weeks. No dates, no destination, no follow-up. Then, on a random Tuesday afternoon, I opened my phone during a break at work and saw Emily's story. A wide, sunlit beach, a hotel balcony overlooking the ocean, 3 drinks clinking together in a boomerang video, and my parents smiling in the background like they just won the lottery. The caption read, "Family time hits different." I stared at my phone longer than I want to admit. At first, I assumed it was a spontaneous thing. Maybe Emily had planned something and invited them along. That wouldn't have bothered me. But the more I watched, the more it became clear this wasn't last minute. This was planned. The matching hotel key envelopes, the rental car selfie, the day 3 caption the next morning. I waited. I told myself my parents would call, or text, or say something like, "Hey, we should have told you sooner." They didn't. By day 4, I finally called my dad. He sounded relaxed. Too relaxed. "Oh, hey son," he said, like this was any other day. "What's up?" "Where are you guys?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. There was a brief pause. We're down in Florida, just for the week." With Emily, I said. Another pause, this one heavier. "Yes," he admitted. She needed a break. That sentence landed harder than anything else he could have said. I asked the obvious question, the one that had been echoing in my head since I saw that first photo. Why wasn't I invited? He sighed, like I'd asked something unreasonable. "Well, you've been busy," he said. "And Emily's been having a hard time lately. We just thought you'd understand." Understand, that word has followed me my entire life. I didn't yell, I didn't accuse, I didn't bring up old grievances. I just said, "You could have asked." He agreed in theory, but not in practice. He told me they didn't think it was a big deal, that it wasn't meant to hurt me, that sometimes things just work out this way. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the dashboard. It wasn't the vacation itself that hurt. It was the confirmation of something I'd suspected for years but never had proof of. I was optional. Emily, on the other hand, was essential. While they were gone, I tried not to think about it. I muted Emily's stories, threw myself into work, told myself I was being dramatic. Then my mom called me late one night. She sounded off. "Daniel," she said, "have you heard from Emily today?" I hadn't. But something in her voice made my stomach tighten. "No," I said. "Why?" There was a pause long enough that I knew something was wrong. "She hasn't come back to the hotel," my mom said. "She went out this afternoon and she hasn't answered her phone." I asked where they were staying. My mom gave me the name of the hotel, then added, "Your father's talking to the front desk." This really bogged Loudis. I wanted to say something comforting, something helpful, But all I could think was how familiar this felt. Emily disappearing, my parents panicking, me being looped in only when things went wrong. Over the next hour, I stayed on the phone as they tried to track her down. The hotel staff hadn't seen her since early evening. Her phone went straight to voicemail. My dad suggested maybe she'd met friends. My mom said she had a bad feeling. Then, close to midnight, everything changed. My dad's voice came back on the line, tight and controlled in a way I'd only heard a few times before. "Daniel," he said, "we just got a call." "From who?" There was a pause. "The police." That was all he said before my mom started crying in the background. They told me Emily had been arrested. They didn't give details at first, just that there had been an incident, that she was safe, technically, but in custody, that my parents needed to come down to the station. I sat there, listening, feeling something strange rise up in my chest. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't anger. It was a quiet, heavy sense of inevitability. Because for the first time in my life, Emily's chaos hadn't stayed contained. It had spilled out into public, into consequences, into something my parents couldn't smooth over with excuses or money or patience. Before we hung up, my mom said something that stuck with me. "I just don't understand how this happened," she said through tears. I almost said it. I almost told her that this didn't happen. This was who Emily had always been. This was the version of her they'd protected from reality for decades. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Let me know what you find out." After the call ended, I sat alone in my apartment, the silence pressing in on me. They had taken her on a vacation meant to heal her. Instead, it had exposed everything, and that was only the beginning. The call came at 1:17 inches the morning. I remember the exact time because I had been staring at my phone for over an hour, not really scrolling, not really thinking, just waiting. I didn't know what for. Maybe for updates. Maybe for confirmation that this whole thing wasn't real. When my dad's name lit up the screen again, my first instinct was dread. "Daniel," he said quietly, like he didn't want to wake anyone else up, even though the hotel room was probably already filled with tension. "We're at the station. How bad is it?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "She was arrested for disorderly conduct," he said. And resisting what became clear a few seconds later. According to the officer my dad spoke to, Emily had been drinking. A lot. Not at the hotel bar. She'd gone out earlier in the afternoon and never come back. She'd ended up at a crowded beachfront area, got into an argument with a stranger, and when security tried to remove her, she escalated it. Raised her voice, threw a drink, refused to leave. By the time the police arrived, the situation had turned into a spectacle. "She says she didn't do anything wrong," my dad added. "She says they were rude to her first." Of course she did. That was Emily's pattern. React first, rewrite later. The part my parents couldn't stop fixating on was that she'd been handcuffed, taken in front of dozens of people, her name recorded, her behavior documented by people who didn't care about her feelings or her explanations. For the first time, there was no one there to smooth things over. They had to post bail early the next morning. Emily wasn't allowed to return to the hotel that night. My parents went back alone, carrying her purse and phone like physical reminders of how fast everything had unraveled. I didn't sleep. The next day, my mom called me again, this time in the afternoon. She sounded exhausted. "She's not herself," my mom said. "She keeps saying this never would have happened if people hadn't been targeting her." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable it hurt. "What happens now?" I asked. "She has a court date," my mom said, "and the hotel manager asked us to leave early." That part surprised me. "They kicked you out?" "They said Emily violated their guest policy," my mom replied. "And since she's on the reservation," her voice trailed off. So the vacation ended 2 days early, not with a sunset dinner or family photos, but with luggage stuffed in silence and a rental car ride filled with arguments and tears. They drove back home in shifts. Emily barely spoke, according to my dad. When she did, it was to blame everyone else. The police were aggressive, the crowd was rude, the staff overreacted, the world was unfair. No apologies, no accountability. When they got back, I expected them to call me right away, to finally have the conversation we'd been avoiding for years. Instead, there was radio silence. 3 days passed, then 5, then a week. I found out through my aunt, my mom's sister, that Emily had moved back in with them temporarily. Again, she's really shaken up, my aunt said gently. "Your parents don't want to push her." Push her? I thanked her and hung up, my jaw tight. It wasn't until almost 2 weeks after the arrest that my parents finally asked me to come over. "Just dinner," my mom said. "We need to talk." The house looked exactly the same when I arrived. Same driveway, same porch light, same familiar feeling of stepping into a place where my role had been decided long before I walked through the door. Emily was there, sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone like nothing had happened. She barely looked up when I came in. "Hey," she said, flat and dismissive. "Hey," I replied. My parents hovered around the stove, moving dishes that didn't need moving. Everyone avoided eye contact. Dinner was awkward, polite, surface level. My dad talked about the weather. My mom asked about my job. Emily complained about how boring it was being home. Finally, after the plates were cleared, my mom sat down and folded her hands. "We wanted to explain what happened," she said. I nodded. "Okay." She launched into a carefully curated version of events. How Emily had been overwhelmed, how the environment was chaotic, how alcohol and stress and misunderstandings all collided. "She's learned a lot," my mom said, glancing at Emily. Emily didn't say a word. I waited, gave them space to keep talking. Eventually, I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since Florida. "Do you understand why I was hurt?" I asked quietly. My mom looked confused. "About the vacation?" "Yes," I said. "About not being invited." My dad sighed. "We didn't mean to exclude you." "But you did," I said. "And then you only called me when something went wrong." Emily scoffed softly. "Oh my God," she said, finally looking up. "Is this really about you right now?" The room went silent. I looked at her, really looked at her. No embarrassment, no remorse, just irritation that attention had shifted. "I wasn't the one who got arrested," she continued. "So maybe let's not make this a whole thing." My mom immediately jumped in. "Emily, that's not fair." "It's fine," I said, holding up a hand. "This actually helps." They all stared at me. "For years," I continued, "I've been told to understand, to be patient, to not take things personally. And every time Emily messes up, there's an explanation, a reason, an excuse." I wasn't raising my voice. That somehow made it worse. And when I finally get honest about how I feel, I added, "I'm told I'm making it about me." My dad looked uncomfortable. My mom looked torn. Emily rolled her eyes. "You've always been dramatic," she said. "Just because you weren't invited on one trip." "One trip?" I interrupted. "This wasn't one trip. This was the pattern." She laughed, short and sharp. "Wow, so now you're the victim?" I stood up. "I didn't come here to fight," I said. "I came because you asked me to." My mom looked panicked. "Daniel, please. I love you both," I said to my parents. "But I'm done pretending this is normal. Downless being goes, it backs it." I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Behind me, Emily muttered, "Unbelievable." What was unbelievable was how familiar this felt. I left that night knowing something had cracked. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough that it couldn't be ignored anymore. A week later, my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked tired, older than I remembered. "I didn't see it," she admitted after sitting down. "Not really. I didn't say anything." "She's been like this for a long time," my mom continued. "We just kept thinking she'd grow out of it, and I grew into the background," I said. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It was the first real apology I'd ever gotten. But it didn't fix everything. Because what I didn't know yet, what none of us knew, was that Emily's arrest in Florida wasn't the worst thing that was about to come out. The unexpected turn didn't come from Emily. It didn't come from my parents either. It came from a number I didn't recognize, calling me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in the middle of a work meeting. I ignored it the first time. Then it called again. And again, by the third call, I excused myself and stepped into the hallway, already annoyed. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then a woman's voice, professional, calm, and unfamiliar. "Is this Daniel Harris?" "Yes. My name is Karen Whitfield. I'm calling from the public defender's office in Bay County, Florida." The words didn't register immediately. What?" I said. "We're representing your sister, Emily Harris, in connection with her recent arrest," she continued. "She listed you as an emergency contact." I leaned against the wall. "What?" "That's actually why I'm calling," the attorney said. "There are some details we need to clarify, and your parents have been difficult to reach." That alone told me something was wrong. "What kind of details?" I asked carefully. Another pause measured this time. "Mr. Harris, your sister's arrest wasn't just for disorderly conduct. The hallway felt suddenly too narrow." "What do you mean?" "She was also charged with credit card fraud," the attorney said, "and we believe you may have information relevant to the case." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. "Credit card fraud?" I repeated. "That can't be right." "I wish it weren't," she replied, "but several charges were made at local businesses using a card that doesn't belong to her." My first thought was that Emily had stolen from a stranger. That alone was bad enough. Then the attorney said the name on the card. My name. The world tilted. That's impossible, I said. I've never given her my card. We understand, she said gently. But the charges were made using a saved card on a mobile payment app registered to you. My stomach dropped. I didn't even need to think about it. 2 years ago, Emily had borrowed my phone while hers was broken. She'd logged into her payment app to split a dinner bill. I remembered because I'd had to reset my password afterward. I never checked to see if my card information stayed logged in. Why would I? She spent just under $3,000 over the course of that weekend, the attorney continued. Clothing, alcohol, ride services, and hotel incidentals not covered by your parents' reservation. I couldn't speak. She claimed she had permission, the attorney added. But given the circumstances and your parents' statements, that's unclear. My parents' statements? I asked. They've said they were unaware she had access to any of your financial information, the attorney said. They also stated they believe the charges were part of the hotel bill. Of course they did. When did you find out? I asked. The bank flagged the activity the day after the arrest, she said. The account holder, you disputed the charges, which triggered the investigation. I laughed once, hollow and sharp. I didn't dispute anything, I said. There was silence on the other end. Mr. Harris, she said slowly, the dispute was filed online using your account credentials. I felt sick. Emily, she logged into my bank? I asked. Yes, the attorney said. Using a password reset sent to an email address we believe she had access to. My chest tightened. She'd stayed with me for a week last year. Used my laptop, borrowed my charger, asked for my Wi-Fi password, all those little things I never thought twice about. This is a misunderstanding, I said automatically. I never authorized any of that. I believe you, the attorney replied, but we need a formal statement. I agreed to come in the following day. When I hung up, I didn't go back to my meeting. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. Emily hadn't just embarrassed my parents. She hadn't just gotten arrested. She had stolen from me. And then let my parents believe it was a mistake. I drove straight to my parents' house. They looked startled when I walked in unannounced. My mom's face drained of color the moment she saw my expression. What's wrong? She asked. I didn't sit down. Emily used my credit card in Florida, I said. Nearly $3,000. My dad frowned. That's not possible. She also logged into my bank account and filed a false dispute in my name, I added. I just got off the phone with a public defender. Silence fell like a weight. My mom slowly turned toward Emily, who was sitting on the couch. Emily, she said quietly. Is that true? Emily didn't answer. Emily, my dad said, sharper now. She crossed her arms. I was going to pay him back. My mom's voice shook. You didn't tell us. Emily shrugged. You were stressed enough. I felt something inside me snap, not explosively, but cleanly, like a rope finally giving way after years of strain. You let them think it was the hotel, I said. You let them apologize to staff. You let them cover for you. Emily rolled her eyes. It wasn't a big deal. A big deal? I repeated. You committed fraud. In my name. My dad stood up slowly. You said you only spent a little. Emily scoffed. I didn't realize you'd freak out like this. That was it. That was the moment my parents finally saw what I'd been seeing my entire life. Not the reckless younger daughter who needed patience, but an adult who felt entitled to other people's money, protection, and silence. My mom sank into a chair. You lied to us, she whispered. Emily looked genuinely annoyed now. I didn't lie. I just didn't explain everything. My dad's voice was low. You stole from your brother. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. No excuses left. The next week was chaos. Police reports, bank affidavits, long, quiet conversations between my parents behind closed doors. For the first time, they didn't ask me to understand. They asked me what I wanted. I told them the truth. I want my name cleared, I said, and I'm not covering for her. Emily was furious when she realized I wasn't backing down. She accused me of betrayal, of overreacting, of finally showing my true colors. The irony almost hurt. My parents didn't argue. They paid for a lawyer for me, not her. And when the attorney told them that Emily could face serious consequences if I didn't retract my statement, my mom cried harder than I'd ever seen. But she didn't ask me to change my mind. That was the unexpected turn, not the arrest, not the fraud, but the moment my parents stopped protecting her and finally stood beside me. By the time the court date approached, the family dynamic I'd known my whole life was already gone. Once the truth was out, everything moved faster than anyone expected. There was no dramatic family meeting, no shouting match where years of favoritism were suddenly confessed out loud. Instead, there was something far quieter and far more unsettling. Distance, Emily stopped pretending nothing was wrong the moment she realized my parents weren't going to fix this for her. The night after I filed my formal statement, she packed an overnight bag and stormed out of the house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. She left behind her phone charger, half her clothes, and the unspoken assumption that someone would chase after her. No one did. My mom sat at the kitchen table for hours that night, not crying, just staring at the wood grain like she was seeing it for the first time. My dad cleaned dishes that were already clean, his jaw clenched, saying nothing. I stayed longer than I meant to. Not because I felt responsible, but because, for the first time in my life, my presence actually seemed to matter. She always said you'd abandon her, my mom said quietly at one point, not looking at me. I didn't respond right away. I didn't, I said finally. I just stopped covering. That distinction mattered more than I realized. Over the next few weeks, the consequences stacked up. Emily's court date was moved up due to the fraud charge being tied to an active investigation. Her public defender strongly advised her to take a plea deal. She refused, said she was being targeted, said I was exaggerating. When the bank completed its review, the charges were ruled unauthorized. The money was returned to my account. Emily was furious, not relieved. She sent me messages accusing me of ruining her life and choosing money over family. I didn't reply. I forwarded everything to my attorney and blocked her number. My parents didn't argue with me about that either. That might have been the hardest part for them, realizing how many times they'd asked me to swallow discomfort for the sake of keeping the peace. Was X-Plays in these all taxer? The peace, it turned out, had always been fragile, just propped up by silence. One afternoon, about a month after everything blew up, my dad asked me to help him clean out the garage. That alone told me he wanted to talk. We worked side by side for a while, moving boxes, sorting old tools, throwing away things no one had touched in years. Finally, he said, "We thought if we loved her enough, she'd settle." I wiped my hands on a rag. "That's not love," I said gently. "That's insulation." He nodded slowly. "We insulated her from consequences." "Yes," I said, "and you insulated yourselves from reality." He didn't argue. Emily showed up unexpectedly 2 weeks later. I wasn't there, but my mom told me what happened. She arrived demanding money, not asking, demanding. Said she needed help with legal fees, said family was supposed to stick together, said I'd gone cold. My mom told her no. Not maybe, not later, no. Emily laughed in disbelief. She accused them of choosing me over her. My mom's response broke something open. "We didn't choose him," she said. "We finally stopped choosing you at everyone else's expense." Emily left in tears that time. Real ones, according to my mom. But still, no apology, no ownership. The court date came and went. Emily accepted a reduced plea after the prosecutor laid out the evidence, transaction logs, login records, timestamps, and her own messages admitting she'd borrowed the money. She avoided jail, but not consequences. Probation, mandatory financial counseling, a permanent mark on her record. My parents attended the hearing. They sat behind her, not beside her. When my mom told me that, I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized I was holding. For years, I'd believed I was invisible because I was easy. Turns out, I was invisible because everyone else was too busy managing chaos. Once the chaos stopped being manageable, everything shifted. My parents started asking me questions not about Emily, but about me. How I was doing, what I wanted, whether I felt comfortable coming over, whether I needed space. No one asked me to forgive. No one asked me to be the bigger person. They just listened. Emily didn't come home after that. She bounced between friends, then moved out of state for what she called a fresh start. My parents helped her with a single month's rent and nothing more. Boundaries, real ones. The family I had grown up in was gone. In its place was something unfamiliar, quieter, slower, and more honest. But it wasn't over yet. I didn't feel victorious when it was over. That surprised me. For years, I thought that if my parents ever truly saw Emily, if they saw the entitlement, the manipulation, the way consequences been around her, then something inside me would finally feel settled. Like justice would arrive with a sense of relief. It didn't. What came instead was quiet. Emily moved out of state without saying goodbye to me. I found out through my mom, who told me during a Sunday phone call like she was sharing the weather. She said she needs distance, my mom said, from all of us. I didn't respond right away. "Okay," I said eventually, and I meant it. Distance, I'd learned, wasn't abandonment. Sometimes it was honesty without cruelty. The weeks after her departure felt strange. My parents called more often, but not in crisis mode. Not to vent, not to ask me to fix anything, just to talk At first, the conversations were stiff, like we were all learning a new language. My mom would ask how work was going and then actually wait for the answer. My dad would ask my opinion and not immediately counter it with his own. One evening, my mom said something that stayed with me. "I keep thinking about how often we told you to be patient," she said softly, "and how rarely we asked Emily to be responsible. I didn't pile on. I didn't need to. They were already there." A few months later, my parents asked if I wanted to go on a short trip with them. Nothing elaborate, just a quiet weekend at a cabin a few hours away. This time, my dad added carefully, we wanted to ask first. That was the moment it fully sank in. Not because of the trip, but because of the pause, the awareness, the respect. We went, it was calm. No drama, no tension, no one walking on eggshells. We cooked simple meals, took long walks, and talked about things that had nothing to do with Emily. For the first time, I wasn't the backup plan. I was just included. On the last night, sitting by the fire, my dad said, "I used to think keeping the peace meant keeping everyone close." My mom nodded. "Turns out it meant keeping you quiet." They both looked at me then. "I'm sorry," my dad said, not defensively, not vaguely, just honestly. I felt something shift, not into forgiveness exactly, but into acceptance. Because here's the truth, I didn't expect to learn from all of this. Being the easy one doesn't make you stronger. It just makes it easier for people to forget you have limits. Emily didn't ruin the family vacation. She revealed the cost of ignoring patterns and calling it love. She exposed years of imbalance that had nothing to do with Florida and everything to do with how accountability had been unevenly distributed. And as painful as it was, I wouldn't undo it. Because the moment my parents stopped protecting her from consequences, they finally protected me from being invisible. I don't know where Emily will land. I hope she figures things out. I really do. But for the first time in my life, her journey isn't mine to manage. And that might be the healthiest outcome of all. I didn't feel victorious when it was over. That surprised me. For years, I thought that if my parents ever truly saw Emily, if they saw the entitlement, the manipulation, the way consequences bent around her, then something inside me would finally feel settled. Like justice would arrive with a sense of relief. It didn't. What came instead was quiet. Emily moved out of state without saying goodbye to me. I found out through my mom, who told me during a Sunday phone call like she was sharing the weather. She said she needs distance, my mom said, from all of us. I didn't respond right away. "Okay," I said eventually, and I meant it. Distance, I'd learned, wasn't abandonment. Sometimes it was honesty without cruelty. The weeks after her departure felt strange. My parents called more often, but not in crisis mode. Not to vent, not to ask me to fix anything, just to talk. At first, the conversations were stiff, like we were all learning a new language. My mom would ask how work was going and then actually wait for the answer. My dad would ask my opinion and not immediately counter it with his own. One evening, my mom said something that stayed with me. "I keep thinking about how often we told you to be patient," she said softly, "and how rarely we asked Emily to be responsible. I didn't pile on. I didn't need to. They were already there." A few months later, my parents asked if I wanted to go on a short trip with them. Nothing elaborate, just a quiet weekend at a cabin a few hours away. This time, my dad added carefully, "We wanted to ask first." That was the moment it fully sank in. Not because of the trip, but because of the pause, the awareness, the respect. We went, it was calm, no drama, no tension, no one walking on eggshells. We cooked simple meals, took long walks, and talked about things that had nothing to do with Emily. For the first time, I wasn't the backup plan. I was just included. On the last night, sitting by the fire, my dad said, "I used to think keeping the peace meant keeping everyone close." My mom nodded. "Turns out it meant keeping you quiet." They both looked at me then. "I'm sorry," my dad said, not defensively, not vaguely, just honestly. I felt something shift, not into forgiveness exactly, but into acceptance. Because here's the truth, I didn't expect to learn from all of this. Being the easy one doesn't make you stronger. It just makes it easier for people to forget you have limits. Emily didn't ruin the family vacation. She revealed the cost of ignoring patterns and calling it love. She exposed years of imbalance that had nothing to do with Florida and everything to do with how accountability had been unevenly distributed. And as painful as it was, I wouldn't undo it. Because the moment my parents stopped protecting her from consequences, they finally protected me from being invisible. I don't know where Emily will land. I hope she figures things out. I really do. But for the first time in my life, her journey isn't mine to manage. And that might be the healthiest outcome of all.